Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man back. First time I can call him this. He's the FCC chairman. It is Brendan Carr. Brendan, how are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, Joe, so good to be with you. So good to be with your listeners and viewers. I was just saying to you, you were with me, your viewers were with me through some deep, dark periods of time when I was in the minority. It felt like I was coming on every day to talk about we got another loss here, another loss there.
Yeah.
But it's pretty nice now. Now we're in the majority. Now I'm the chairman, and we're putting some wins on the board, and love to be back with you now.
Well, listen, thank you for all the time and the access and the friendship over the years. Is China still threatening you? Are they even madder now that you're the boss?
I'm pretty confident. Actually, I've got a new lead for the chairman's office. I have a national security advisor that's going to report directly to me, and we're going to run a big docket to make sure that we're protecting our national security. A lot of your viewers probably heard about this thing, Salt Typhoon. It's the most, massive cyber attack our country has ever had.
Yeah.
And, we're putting a work stream obviously together on that, working with President Trump and turning things around there.
Is the hardest part safeguarding all of it? As soon as you try to get ahead of it, another cyber attack can happen. Another bad actor can do something else. Is it like a daily operation, even maybe hourly operation to stay ahead of the game?
Of course, yeah. The CCP's approach is death by a thousand cuts. There's things that we know about, Huawei, ZTE, but they're super sophisticated, and they are just always poking, always looking for a way through our systems from a software perspective. All the way on down. In fact, China, for instance, has their own version of Starlink satellite system that they're looking to launch. I think it's called StarNet because the CCP steals everything, including the names.
Everything.
But there's a really big geopolitical issue there because once China does stand up their version of Starlink, imagine them pairing global internet connectivity with CCP internet filters and their sort of terrestrial Belt and Road initiative. So that's one of the reasons why we need to be, as a country, making sure that Starlink and hopefully soon Amazon Kuiper, U.S.-based satellite systems are succeeding, which is the opposite of what we saw during the Biden administration. We saw weaponization of the FCC against Elon Musk, against Starlink, simply because, in my view, of their political perspectives. And we're putting an end to that. Every single person in the country now is going to get a fair shake from the FCC. And I got to say, some people are upset about that. And to sort of paraphrase a line from Thomas Sowell, there are people that have been benefiting from the weaponization of government. Now that everyone's getting equal treatment, they feel like they're being discriminated against, but simply not the case.
Yeah, exactly right. They're used to it. I guess what they had very, very subversively for a long time suddenly became the mainstream, and now you try to take the mainstream away by saying it never should have gone this far, and that's where the freak out is. It's Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC. Go to @BrendanCarrFCC over on X and also FCC.gov. When it comes to TikTok, now that we're talking about China, does the FCC play any role in whether it should be banned or not banned or owned by this guy or owned by that guy? Does your commission do anything with that?
Really, where this stands, it's outside of the FCC. So Congress passed a law. Obviously, I think we talked about this, that gave the president the ability to put a pause on it and allow for negotiations. The goal here is not to ban short form video applications or ban TikTok per se. This isn't some sort of modern day version of the movie Footloose where they were opposed to dancing and we're opposed to short form video. The issue is dealing with national security threat, and President Trump has come in. He's put a pause on that law to allow him to help negotiate a solution here that'll work for our national security and for the interests in the millions of Americans that use TikTok. And so, we're going to follow his lead. He's got a great team put together on this, and I'm confident that President Trump's going to land this in a really good spot. It's outside the FCC at this point, but, I'm an observer of this now like everybody else.
Well, Chairman, that was a great reference that shows our age and our generation, I think, the Footloose reference. But people can go back and check that out and see what it means. But exactly right. I think it's almost exactly the same thing. It's not about we hate that there's fun out there. No, this is about, is there danger in their data collection? Is there danger in how they're driving the content? I would love to see somebody on this side of the world, have ownership in it and get it away from the eyeballs of the CCP. But here's the weird part. I'm on TikTok. I've been on there a year and a half. I've got 830,000 followers as a conservative American. That's very interesting to me. So the algorithm isn't necessarily working against an ideology, but I think the targeting of young people with making sure they feel this way about China or that way about the United States or this way about globalists, that is a problem. You think at the end of the day something's going to happen? I think it's about 45 more days. Trump today said 90, but I thought the initial break was 45. Maybe he'll have to ask for another extension. Do you feel confident something will happen to where it will stay viable, but it won't be in the hands of the CCP?
I think it's right. I think President Trump's got this on a good path, and the legislation that was passed by Congress, specifically contemplated exactly this, which is something where we can both address the national security and have the application continue to be used. And I think President Trump's right to try to drive everybody towards that type of a solution, and hopefully that's where we'll land it.
It is Brendan Carr. He's the chairman of the FCC. Always a pleasure to have you on, my friend. Let's talk about the idea that states, whether it be mayors or county executives or state governors, are saying we're not going to help ICE. We're not going to help Tom Homan go out and find the criminal aliens that are in the country and round them up and deport them. In fact, we're not going to lift a finger. We're not going to listen to your detainers, nothing. If they stay out of the way, that's not really illegal. I think that it's wrong, and they should be helping out, obviously. But then you go to a different side of the aisle where maybe you've got people saying, hey, ICE is doing an operation over here, so avoid that area. And then they get into your wheelhouse when they do it over the radio airwaves. What happened in San Jose, California that you're looking into?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. To your point, there's been a lot of resistance to President Trump's decision to deport people that are here illegally. And I guess, the good thing about this resistance is it means there's something to resist, meaning that President Trump,
Yes.
Secretary Noem, Tom Homan, they just hit the ground running, and they are delivering on the campaign promises that they made and that the vast majority, I think, of this country want to see. There was an incident that involved a radio station in San Jose, California, that was apparently, and we're still looking at this, but according to reports, was in real time identifying the locations of undercover ICE agents, the make, model of their vehicle, the street intersections that they were at.
Wow.
And again, this is right around the same time where you had Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat leader in the House, saying that Democrats needed to take their resistance, or at least their fight, to the streets. And so we have reached out through a formal letter of inquiry. The response is due this week. Because again, radio broadcasters are different than a person on the street. They have to operate in the public interest because they have a license. They have access to a valuable public resource that not everybody else has. And we've asked them, pretty simple questions about whether doing that is consistent with their public interest obligation. And we'll see where this investigation goes at the end of the day.
So, in other words, just want to make sure that we're setting the scene right. The allegation is they found out where ICE was doing their operations and then got that information, put it on the public airwaves to basically warn people, don't be where they are. But at the same time, I believe, Brendan, maybe I'm wrong about this, I believe they also put the ICE agents' lives and safety in danger. They're literally helping out who we know are here illegally, so they're literally helping out people we know have committed some sort of a violation of United States law. I mean, am I right in making all of that assumption?
Yeah, these are the concerns that we've heard that have been raised at the FCC, and that's a letter of inquiry that's now open, and everybody is going to have an opportunity to make their voices heard on this, as they are, and we're going to continue to look at it. Are there laws at issue? Obviously, we want broadcasters reporting news and information and publicly available information, and so we're going to have to sort of sort through all of this. But just as an initial step, I thought it was important to do some fact gathering and reach out to that broadcaster and see what information they have on this incident.
Is this radio station somehow linked to George Soros?
Well, it's an Odyssey radio station. So ultimately, yeah, it is tied back to this Soros-backed group that purchased 200 radio stations across hundreds of markets across the country.
Before this all went down, you were very upset about it. Before you were the chairman, you were still in the minority, and the majority seemed to blow off standard operating procedure when it comes to buying radio stations. I guess the last time we spoke about it, and please correct me on it with any updates, you were concerned that we hadn't really done the due diligence in this country to make sure that we knew where that funding was coming from. Do we now know where the funding came from? And does he de facto own part or all of 200 plus radio stations?
Yeah, you're right. So the FCC, this Soros-backed group, was looking to buy these 200 Odyssey radio stations out of bankruptcy. To do that, you need the FCC to approve it, again, because there's federal license at issue. And we have a normal process for doing that, particularly in a case like this, where they indicated that they had excessive foreign ownership, which in our rules means more than 25% of the relevant funding or stock comes from an entity that's outside the U.S. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's nefarious or from a threat country, but when you have excessive foreign ownership, you run a national security review. Here, the Soros group attempted to put the cart before the horse, and they created the FCC, the full commission, for the first time ever, a special Soros shortcut where they allowed him to obtain control to get these licenses based on a promise that he will come back later and run the national security review. Again, the full commission had never done that before. My understanding is they actually maybe pulled away some of that funding at this point.
Okay.
But I got to sort of get an update as to where that stands. But there's still pieces of that transaction that may very well be before the FCC. And so we're going to be keeping an eye on this.
In a very general sense, it's the chairman, by the way, of the FCC is Brendan Carr. Follow him, Brendan Carr, FCC, over on socials. Let's talk hypothetically. We know that we just talked about a specific thing, but let me just hypothetically throw this out there. You've got somebody that you or an entity that we know is not on the side of freedom and liberty, not on the side of the American way, not on the side of the Constitution, not using any names, just hypothetically. That person wants to buy a bunch of TV or radio stations that are regulated or overseen by the FCC. Isn't there some way that you can say you can't do this in that hypothetical sense?
In order to obtain and to continue to hold, frankly, any radio or broadcast TV license, the FCC has to make an affirmative finding that you're operating in the public interest. And the reality is the FCC over the last decade or so has completely walked away from that public interest obligation. And one of the things I think people have seen, and some don't like it, but over the first 3 weeks of my time on this job as chairman, is I'm looking to reinvigorate that. And if people don't like it, they have a couple options. One, if you're a TV or radio station and you don't like having to live up to your public interest obligation, which is a condition of your license, I will give you the FCC's address. You can turn your license in. Otherwise, you can go to Congress and get them to change the law. But my job is to administer the law, and the law says you got to operate in the public interest. But just step back for a second and think about where we are with respect to media in general. Trust in the national news media is absolutely rock bottom. It's at an all-time low. That's just not my opinion alone. You look at Jeff Bezos, he did an op-ed saying that at least for a long time, the national media could console themselves by being more popular, according to surveys, than Congress. And now they're even less popular than Congress itself. And so I don't know that the federal government needs to come in and fix this per se, but I do think we should actually at least do what Congress wants. Now, again, there's some silver lining here. Local media is actually very trusted. People like their local news. They like the anchors that they see at the grocery store and the post office. So one of the things I'm trying to do is try to re-empower the local broadcasters to serve their local communities and take a look at ways that I think, ABC, CBS, NBC, other national broadcasters may be acting contrary to the interests of those local broadcast stations. So I think you'll see a lot of activity at the FCC designed to re-empower those licensed local broadcast stations.
Well, I think you're right. I think that media, I think it is local. You can expand that to something more national, but I think they lose the perspective completely. I think the last number I saw, Brendan, was about 13% trust. It might even be lower than that now in the national media. Let me ask you about not on the air stuff.
13% is Yeah, I was going to say 13% is pretty low. I got more trust in gas station sushi than that, I think.
I'm with you on that as well. And don't trust the gas station sushi necessarily. Is Brendan Carr the chairman of the FCC? Do you also regulate or oversee or have any say in cable? There's always been a confusion in my mind because I see the FCC as the Federal Communications Commission that deals with the public airwaves. You just talked about the public service that it does and the public awareness that it brings. Do you also have a part in cable or not?
Yeah, this is where there's some jurisdictional legal authority silos that, the average person doesn't really understand. Again, when you look at ABC, CBS, NBC, in the main, those entities aren't licensed by the FCC. They're just the programmers. They create the content, usually pulling it from Hollywood or New York, and they push it down to the local TV stations. Those local TV stations are regulated by the FCC. That's where our public interest authority is. Cable is sort of the next level where we have limited authority over cable. It's not the same as our authority over broadcast. They don't have a public interest obligation per se. We do have some authority. For instance, if a cable company is vertically integrated, meaning let's say they have a sports channel and they preference their sports channel and therefore don't carry a sports channel from an independent person. There's some authority the FCC has there to address self-preferencing. But, national news media, ABC, CBS, NBC, apart from their ownership of local stations, we don't have much authority. The local stations, we have a lot of authority, public interest obligation, and then cable, relatively less authority. But most people, they don't get it. And I understand it. You're on, your TV channel, you click the button, it's a cable channel, you click another button, you don't know it. It's a licensed TV station. So there's some confusion out there. I think part of what I got to do is help sort of educate people on where the FCC, again, if you don't like the public interest obligation, go over the top. Go to an internet streaming service and you can escape that public interest obligation pretty easily.
It is Brendan Carr, the FCC chairman. We always appreciate the time and the access. We've talked about this over the years. I know that I think it was $44 billion was allocated to bring higher speed internet to rural areas, areas that weren't covered. And Kamala Harris was in charge of getting that done. And I'm pretty sure last time we spoke, not one person got new high speed internet because of those billions of dollars. Has that money been spent? Has it been reallocated? Will you get oversight over that, and people who don't have high-speed internet can now get it? Why wasn't it spent at all? Was it just ignored, do you think?
This $40+ billion effort was started years and years ago under the Biden administration to connect millions of Americans to high-speed internet, and is a microcosm, I think, for the failure of progressive left policies. Rather than focusing on quickly connecting people, they decided to use this $40+ billion program to advance a climate change agenda, DEI requirements, price controls, Green New Deal obligations, so you can have your bulldozer be connected to some sort of solar panel rather than running on diesel. And so They went nowhere. Not a single shovel of dirt was turned. Not a single person was connected. Thankfully, now President Trump has come in. Howard Lutnick is going to be the Commerce Secretary. This program is housed in Commerce, and he is going to be able to sort of help fix this. There's a lot of options that he's going to have to work through, but he'll be leading on this, and I'll be happy to support his efforts from my perch at the FCC.
Well, listen, it would be wonderful if we did have that available to everybody. I don't understand how they hid so much in so much of what they did. The Inflation Reduction Act was all about climate change as well. Brendan, how did they get away with that? I always thought there was at least a modicum of truth in wherever the legislation was. You call it the Inflation Reduction Act, it should do a little of that. You save $44 billion to bring high-speed internet, you should bring a little high-speed internet. $9 billion to build terminals for electric cars, you should build more than 5 or 6 terminals or 2 terminals, whatever the hell it was. So is there some way to reform that? Now that you're the chairman of the FCC, the president is back, you've got the Commerce Secretary that we all like now, we've got all these people that are coming in that really do want to do the work of the American people. Can we dial it back and stop lying in legislation, stop lying in what it is that we do governmentally, and start telling the truth and really do what you say you're going to do?
Yeah, at least right now, I think that's definitely the case. President Trump has come in. He's, moved immediately with a number of executive orders to reorient government. I mean, if you think about it, most people come to D.C. and they hope to just turn the ship of government 1 degree here, 2 degrees there. But President Trump has fundamentally rejected that approach, and we're taking significant actions to reorient the federal government to efficiently performing. Elon Musk is doing with Doge, and at the FCC, we're doing the same thing. We're getting rid of DEI. The FCC has ended our promotion of DEI. I mean, DEI was listed as the second highest strategic priority for the FCC. Wow. It was in our budget. We were spending millions and millions of dollars on it, but we're getting back to our knitting here and just focused on getting people connected.
Well, I said this before we started. I'm super proud of you, my friend. I'm so glad that you're the chairman of the FCC. Well-deserved. Go and follow him everywhere, Brendan Carr, FCC, or go to fcc.gov. Brendan, thanks a million.
Yeah, good to see you, buddy. Appreciate it.
Good to see you. We're back after this. Stay right here.